Kevin Burke, Pastoral Associate at Priests for Life, co-founder of Rachel's Vineyard Ministries for Healing After Abortion, and also Pastoral Associate with the Silent No More Awareness Campaign. Great to be with you today. We're going to be talking about men and abortion, how men are impacted by abortion, and I'm so blessed today to have my friend and colleague, David Williams. David is a pastor, an evangelist, a public speaker. He has been a chaplain for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's done a lot of awesome things, but he's got a really powerful story. We want to share that with you today. You know, a lot of folks say that abortion is a private, personal decision that a woman makes, and they don't really give much attention to how a man's involved in that. Would you say that you see abortion that way as a private decision, or do you think men are impacted by that? And what's your experience in that area?
Men are deeply impacted by abortion. You think of a woman becoming pregnant. She didn't become pregnant on her own. It was a man that was involved in that. And so with the baby that's being formed in the womb, there's a mother of an unborn baby, but there's also a father of an unborn baby. I think men are deeply impacted when an abortion decision is made, because there's a loss. One, there's a tragic loss of a child, innocent child. There's loss and pain that women experience, and I think more and more people are recognizing that. But there's also deep loss that comes to a man. There's loss of fatherhood that comes with it, and that brings a lot of pain. And men may not realize it, but there is a pain that comes with that.
Now you know that pain personally. Could you share? And I want to thank you for your courage, and of course that courage comes from the Lord and from His healing. But would you share from your own personal experience of facing an unplanned pregnancy?
When I was 19, I was a college sophomore. My girlfriend and I were in a sexual relationship, and she became pregnant, and we weren't ready to become parents. She wasn't ready to be a mom, neither was I ready to be a dad, and we were dreaming of getting a college degree and getting a great job. We were first generation college students. So we made the, I guess, immediate decision to have an abortion, thinking that our lives would continue as they were. Since we loved each other, we could have a child later on, we could get married, we could do all those things later. There was immediate consequences that we experienced. One was deep pain in our relationship, which led to a breakup. So there was loss in that way. There was a lot of pain that I experienced because of that loss of relationship, probably not correlating it at the time to the child per se. But there were a number of things that took place in my life. So increased drunkenness, promiscuity with women, a drive to really be successful as a college student. There was increased anger in my life that came from it. And these things just continued on and led me down into some other decisions that later on exasperated even that.
When I heard you tell your story before, you talked about how powerful the reaction to a pregnancy and to a woman's decision-making process about that abortion. How influential and powerful a man's role is in that. Can you talk a little bit about how you felt that your partner at that time was kind of maybe sending signals that she wanted you to have a different response than you were giving her? Could you share about that?
Yeah. When we first learned about it, both of us pretty much, I think, early on said, yeah, abortion would be the best thing to do. As we made that decision and it got closer to her actually taking the steps to go and have the abortion, she began to question me quite frequently, saying, David, do you think this is the right thing to do? Looking back, I think she was really asking me to make a different choice. She was looking for me to be the man, to man up and to protect our child. I kind of hedged and hogged, but eventually got to the place to say, yeah, I think this is the right decision. And I think that brought deep pain to her, because I think she was looking for me to step up. And I think over time it brought deep pain to me, because I realized I didn't step up and be the man and be the protector that I was supposed to be.
After the abortion, when you found yourself drinking more and being promiscuous and really feeling driven to be successful, you know, in your school and stuff, did you associate it during that time in any way with the abortion? Did you make a connection between that stuff and the abortion loss?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, I knew there was some pain. I knew there was some hurt. I probably correlated more with the loss of a relationship. I didn't have a great relationship with my mom and dad growing up. Okay. So here's a young lady and we're in a relationship and I'm thinking I found someone who I really love. So I think early on I thought that the pain and the hurt was more of because of the loss of that relationship, and the abortion was a part of what caused the loss of that relationship. But I never would have correlated it, any pain that I was experiencing, particularly or directly to the abortion.
Okay. After that, there was another relationship, and then you faced another unplanned pregnancy. Could you share a little bit about that?
So at 22, 3 years later, faced another unplanned pregnancy. The excuses I had when I was 19, I no longer had anymore. I was a college graduate. I realized there was pain which happened because of the abortion and more of the loss of the relationship. And I think because of that, I didn't want to kind of go down that same route again. Right. So we ended up having the child. We ended up getting married. But me putting a ring on her finger didn't change anything about me. So I was very sexually promiscuous before. Now I'm committing adultery. I'm very angry with her. Maybe feeling like I was forced into a marriage because of the situation that we were in.
So you had resentment.
I had resentment, and then when our son was born, there wasn't really great happiness. You would think, like, this is my first child, a son. You would think there would be great happiness, and there really wasn't. There was a dullness that was there.
Kind of a numbness that you're experiencing. Yep. Then you had this powerful experience of the Lord coming into your life. That marriage broke down, and there's divorce. And then the Lord came powerfully into your life when you were about age 26.
Yes.
Is that right? Could you share a little bit about that and your marriage?
Yeah, I ended up coming to know the Lord when I was 26. A lot of it was through some relationships I had with some men that I had actually gone to high school with, whose lives probably were very similar to mine. But I hadn't seen them in years, and when I saw them again, their lives were transformed. They were different men. And I began to realize it was because they had a relationship with Jesus Christ. And so I began, as I was going through my loss and my pain, God actually brought me to the place where I cried out and asked Jesus to forgive me and to come in and started a relationship with God. And there were some things that began to change in my life. I was no longer sexually promiscuous. I no longer was a drunk. I was one who they would say cursed like a sailor. I didn't curse anymore. So there were some immediate things that I saw happen in my life, but yet there were some things that continued to drag on. And
so the Lord was working powerfully in your life in some really significant areas of you as a man, but there was something still. There was still an area of woundedness that the Lord would call you to. So you married a wonderful woman. You're still your wife now. Yep. How many years?
17 years.
17 years. You now have, what, 6?
We have 6 kids together. 6 from 16, almost 16 down to 1 year old.
So early in your marriage, you were, you're speaking and sharing your story and representing, spreading the gospel of Christ.
Yep.
And yet you had this encounter with a man that was very influential at that time to help you focus a little more on where God was calling you. Could you share that with us?
So, I ended up actually being asked to speak and share my story at a pregnancy center. And so I shared, and afterwards there was a gentleman who came up to me and gave me his card, said he'd love to talk. And we finally ended up talking on the phone, and he said, one, I think God's going to use your life in this area to be a champion for unborn children and minister to others that have gone through this. But before that, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever invited Jesus to really heal that wound of abortion in your heart? And when he said it, I thought it was a crazy question. Because at this point, I actually had been, it was 22 years since the abortion, and I had actually been in a relationship with God for about 15, 16 years at the time. And I was thinking of, Jesus, by this time, of course, he's healed it.
I think that's something the believers and non-believing men, is their common reaction, like, why?
Of course, of course.
That was 15
years ago. I can't still be dealing with it now. And so I know I was forgiven of it. But my response to him, instead of saying what I was thinking, Kevin, I actually said to him, I haven't specifically asked Jesus to heal that wound of abortion in my heart. And he said, well, can I send you a book, and can I set you up with a male counselor to walk through a healing, post-abortion healing Bible study? Right. And I said to him, yes. He sent the book. It was called Fatherhood Aborted. I started reading through this book, and there were some things that I was still dealing with. So I'm a man who's forgiven. I'm in full-time ministry. I'm preaching and sharing God's word and my testimony to different people, but there were still some things I was struggling with. There would be bursts of anger that would come out at my wife and towards my kids, and I would pray about it, and it just seemed like I could never get over it. It was just there. My mom passed, and I couldn't even grieve her loss. It was something in my heart, like my heart was callous. There was this notion to want to be successful, and that transferred from kind of a regular job to ministry, and it was this sense of wanting to be successful, and I felt paralyzed every time there was a big decision that needed to be made. And I was wondering why these things were going on. I read this book this guy sent me, Fatherhood Aborted, and it began to connect some dots for men as they have abortion, that there's some trauma, some stress that comes with it, and it can lead to certain things. And it was almost like God pulled the curtain back to show me that some of the things that I was dealing with, that I had struggled with for years and couldn't get past, they were the ramifications of an abortion decision that I very rarely thought of, and would have never connected the dots as to why I was reacting to certain things because of that decision.
Going through that healing process, really addressing directly that abortion loss was really key for you. And I think that's something I wanted to share with our listeners and audiences, that there's such blessing that comes from taking that leap of faith and going to a Bible study or a Rachel's Vineyard retreat. Folks, you can learn abortion healing resources in your area by going to abortionforgiveness.com. Just put your zip code in there, and it'll give you a list of Bible studies and Rachel's Vineyard retreats in your area. I want to encourage you to do that if you're listening today and you've been hurt by abortion, or perhaps you were part of an abortion decision or paid for someone else's abortion, drove them to an abortion, or a grandparent or a sibling who has lost a child to abortion. There's so many folks who have been intimately touched by the death of unborn children that would benefit from abortion healing programs.
Yeah.
How has the Lord blessed you now in your current work? Where is God calling you now in your life at this part of your journey, which has been really an amazing one so far?
Yeah, it has been an amazing journey. I've served as a pastor, I've served as a chaplain, I've served as a traveling speaker, and yet in this season I feel like God is calling me to share His grace, His healing with others. And a lot of that is through, I think, even my family. God, walking through an abortion, post-abortion healing Bible study has really changed some things in my life for the better. My relationship with my wife, my relationship with my kids, even the way I view ministry, that it's not now out of trying to be successful, it's out of a gratitude for God's love and God's healing for me, which has brought great freedom to my life. And in this season, I feel like the Lord has called me to a ministry to show forth the reality of Christ, His forgiveness and His healing, and a lot of that tangibly through my family, through the story of His redemption in my story. And so if any of you are watching today and you have deep wounds and deep hurts where you may want to put a period, God, it's a comma, that if you allow God to enter into that place and bring healing to those deep wounds and deep hurts, that God can use your misery to be a great ministry, that He can use your mess to be a message. He can bring great healing to your hurts as He binds up your wounds, and use your life to show forth the healing power of Christ. And that's what God has pretty much called me to. Amen. Through a speaking ministry to young people and others.
Beautiful. Finally, I want to mention that you were very kind to contribute your story and a reflection on abortion in the African American community, and you put it into a historical context of looking at the experience of the black family and the effects of slavery, and tying some of that into abortion and some of the struggle in some of our churches of all denominations to come to terms with this issue of abortion. Could you share briefly about that? And the book is called, folks, Tears of the Fisherman. And you can go to tearsofthefisherman.com to learn more about that book. But would you share a few?
Yeah, I think the legacy of slavery has affected the family, I think, in the African American community in a very unique way. Even from men who were, pretty much not treated as if they were created, men and women who weren't created in the image of God, men who often at times were taken from woman to woman to try to breed a workforce who could do work. So there was this thing of marriage and family, a breakdown of that. I think there was deep pain and trauma that came through all that has been experienced. And so when I look at abortion and I look at the parallels, you look at a people, African Americans in this country, who at one time weren't even maybe looked at as if they were people. And now you look now and we have, who are not looked at as people in our country today? It's the unborn. They're not even looked at as if they are people. And I think because of some of the ramifications of slavery and even how it's affected things, there is still this sense of racism. And I think sometimes that can play into even the abortion narrative in the African American community. I mean, you look at places like Planned Parenthood, where do you find the majority of them are? They're in the urban inner cities, where predominantly they're African Americans. You got 12% of the country being African Americans, and yet 35% or more of abortions happening within the African American community. It's almost as if a community that has experienced trauma being affected in the very area in which it's been traumatized before.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because something that I find deeply disturbing is the fact that we target communities that are vulnerable to having the most severe traumatic reactions after abortion. When they signed that New York abortion law, and they had people behind the governor of New York applauding, some of them were women of color. And it broke my heart, because in New York City alone, 6 out of every 10 African American pregnancies end in abortion.
Tragic.
And it's really deeply disturbing. And that's why I think this message of understanding you know, the generational wounds, the Lord needs to be brought into these generational wounds, but also we need to understand that abortion is never the answer to an unplanned pregnancy, especially for our poorest communities and minority communities.
Yep. Amen. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate your sharing your story. I mean, I'm so inspired by each time I hear it. I hope that our listeners have been as well. God bless you in your future ministry, and I hope folks will see you as always available to share your message. Pregnancy Resource Centers, if you're having a banquet, he's willing to come speak to your group, come to your college, to your youth group. David Williams is an amazing witness to the power of Christ to restore and heal, no matter what our wounds of our past are. So God bless you, and thanks for being with us today.
But you know what? When you and I take up this call and we talk about abortion, if we speak about it in church, we're told we're too political. If we speak about it in the political arena, we're told we're too religious.